So the question is, the motion be agreed to. The Honourable Mark Lewis.
Thank you, Mr President. Obviously it is with some trepidation that I rise here today, but it is also with some excitement in the acknowledgement of the challenges ahead. Members, please forgive me, I might be a little bit local and parochial than some in this speech, and I would like to touch on a number of points today, and I beg your indulgence if I refer to these notes just a little bit, or maybe a lot. Firstly, and as is customary, I'd like to thank those that have supported me through the long journey to this place. It goes without saying that my family have had to put up with me being away for long periods of time over many years, and I recognise them in the gallery, my wife, Michelle, my daughter, Bridget, and my sister, Glenda, and my son, who is unfortunately unable to be here today. My wife deserves special thanks, as she is not only a wife and a partner, but my very own advisor, and a worthy one, as she's been around the art. She's been in politics for over 16 years, I was informed today, and she's been both around state and federal system, and currently works for the good Senator Eggleston, who I also note is here today. Thank you. My son Matthew must also receive a mention. Being in his late teens through most of those years that I've been away, he would always provide very succinct answers when asked for his advice. It consisted of always issued in that same unaudible tone. He's now thankfully fully comprehensible. My nearly 18-year-old daughter Bridget must also be thanked for her constant advice to me on dress sense. However, much to her chagrin, I have been more than a bit of a challenge in that area. To the rest of my family, represented by Glenda here today, I also must attribute some blame for being destined to politics and Parliament. Unfortunately, my mother, or our mother, has been unwell, so unable to travel, and I'd say to her, she is the bedrock of our family and our moral compass, and I sincerely thank her for that. Not too sure what our dear old dad would say, but he would always give me the advice of sit down, be quiet and listen, very similar to the same advice Mr President gave us. And he would always say it's better to be thought a fool than to say something and be confirmed a fool. So I'll take his advice, however, be sure that I am listening and hopefully learning. Mr President, as you reminded us during our induction, we are all a product of the political framework, and the hard work of those grassroots members that represent our party and these people must also be recognised. In my case, these are the branches throughout the mining and pastoral region, and particularly my home branch and its stalwarts, Bruce and Caroline May at Carnarvon. From the Durack and O'Connor division, I acknowledge Gordon Thompson and Steve Martins as the ever-involved presidents. To all those members that travelled to pre-selection from places like Esperance, Carnarvon, Port Hedland, Broome, Derby, Kununurra, and journeyed to Perth to pre-select candidates, the Liberal Party, the candidates, and especially I, owe you a debt of gratitude. Also, thank you to Ben Morton and his team at Menzies House. As we have heard a number of times, Ben Morton is an extremely talented young man, and if he should ever decide one day to join politics on this side, the country will be better for it. I thank you all for your support to me. To the lower house team in the mining and pastoral, a big thank you to Graham Jacobs from Ayr, Tammy Matra in North West Central, George Leficianos from the Pilbara, Jenny Broome from the Kimberley, and finally I'd like to make special mention of my friend Melissa Price, who, as a new girl on the block, contested the seat of Kalgoorlie, where she won on a primary vote, but was unsuccessful after preferences to Wendy Duncan, MLA, and I congratulate Wendy in this regard. But mark my words, keep an eye out for Melissa in the future. She's an outstanding candidate. Thank you all for running such a dedicated, disciplined and on-message campaign, because as we all know in this chamber, a good lower house candidate is one of the keys to our election to this place. To my upper house colleagues, the Honourable Ken Baston and the Honourable Norman Moore, I thank you both for your guidance and your wisdoms over many years. It is arguable, and I'm not sure he would want this on the record, but the Honourable Ken Baston is probably more culpable than most in me being in this place, as he lured me into politics through the promises of lots of merriment and fun. I thought I was just helping out, making up the numbers sort of thing, at various branches and divisions, functions, etc. But eventually the bug bit, and the rest is history, as they say. So a tongue-in-cheek, guarded and reserved thank you to you, Ken. The Honourable Norman Moore, I'm not going to try to repeat or match the superlatives more eloquently put by others on your contribution here, other than to say that having been through 2 campaigns with you, I've learnt this from you. Stay calm and relax, but I guess it was easy for him to say that after 36 years here, and I think about 8 campaigns, than it is for me as a new boy on the block. I thank you also for offering me the opportunity to take your counsel whenever you need it, except I suspect when you're on the sun deck of a cruise ship in the Aegean Sea, but at least you offered. I wish you and Lee well and expect a call from time to time. Others worthy of an honourable mention are the Honourable Ian Lawrence AM, who's also partly guilty of why I'm here before you today. Ian is a former member of the Legislative Assembly, and I was fortunate enough to have worked for him when he was the chairman of a government committee. I admire Ian and his ability to get things done, and I purposely watch, listen and learn from his every move he made, and if only 5% of that has stuck, then I'm a lucky man. He also left us a legacy, and it was always something that I'll remember when things get tough. And he would always say that humour is still allowed, and I think that's important going forward. And as I said, Ian is a true gentleman, a professional, and I thank him for an interest in my career over a long time. And last but not least are the constituents of the mining and pastoral region. I acknowledge that the trust and responsibility you have afforded me, and I pledge to work with you and for you to the best of my ability and endeavours. I can assure you that I will be keeping as close to the grassroots as I can, and I ask that you keep me informed on the local issues that affect you at all times. I thank you for all your assistance to me on my journey to this place. Mr. President, I'd now like to give a short biography of myself. Again, I understand this is convention, or customary really, to provide others with an insight into my values and my thinking and how these have been formed. For those that remember the Australian country music icon Slim Dusty, I am one of his Cunnamulla fellas, having been born in that small Western Queensland town in 1957. As the Honourable Norman Moore said here on Tuesday night when he mentioned his opening with his opening remarks and stated that most people think that Liberal Party members are all born with a silver spoon in their mouths. And like him, I must confess that I was brought up in a most austere and workmanlike way. Whilst being born in Cunnamulla, I was subsequently raised in central Queensland on a farming and cattle property. My father drew by ballot an undeveloped block, and we basically went in there with an axe and some fencing gear donated to us by relatives. Mum, Dad and us 4 kids lived in a shed for many years. My bedroom was a dorm-like arrangement at the back of the shed with the rest of my siblings, brothers, on a dirt floor. I can still remember the day we poured the concrete underneath our beds. I also remember scolding at school how flash we now were, we had a proper floor. I attended boarding school in Rockhampton, not because of any blue blood destiny, but because there was no secondary facilities in our small rural community, and basically had to. After completing grade 12, I returned home for a stint on the family properties, where I subsequently went to what is now known as the Queensland University Gatton campus as a mature age student in the field of studying in the field of animal production and health. While maintaining an interest in farming and later in sheep and cattle properties in the southwest of Queensland, I started to work for the Veterinary Services branch of the Department of Primary Industries and served in the Channel Country of far western Queensland, even living in Birdsville. I think the population then was about 34. I entered with the QDPI as the Department's District Manager of Mackay, Proserpine Region in 1996. In that same year, over some 17 years ago now, my family and I moved to Carnarvon with the Western Australian Department of Agriculture, fulfilling positions including Program and Regional Manager and Director, and more recently as another Manager of Policy and Industry Development in the Rangelands. Fortunately, the Rangelands region I operate in over the years covers most of the mining and pastoral region, except for the bit around Yilgarn and Esperance. And obviously this has allowed me to acquire and develop a keen understanding of the issues in the mining and pastoral region. During my professional career, I undertook additional studies and completed a Masters of Applied Science in Agriculture and Rural Development, as well as completing a couple of postgraduate qualifications in management. In my recent role, I've been deeply involved in looking at ways to securing food for our future through the investigation and development of new agriculture markets in areas not just in the Ord but outside the Ord, and more broadly within the mining and pastoral region. I will return to this issue later. However, suffice to say, it is this backdrop and the reasons my heart and soul is connected to rural and regional Australia. I trust my background and my life experience will provide me a platform for my new role in this place. Mr. President, I'd now like to turn to my third point, which is to outline my views on why I'm here, and importantly, why the Legislative Council and not the Legislative Assembly. I don't know why, but I excelled at social studies with near perfect scores during primary schools, the only thing I actually excelled at. But for those that can't remember or didn't partake in social studies, it was a compulsory part of the curriculum back then and provided to primary grade students a basic insight into the way our society worked and the way it was governed. You know, the whole Westminster thing. And I think, again, sometimes I think this is now sorely missed in the curriculum. That aside, I guess I've been a student of government for some time and have always been aware of the role of government, and unusually as an ex-Queenslander, who, as you might be aware, does not have an upper house, or maybe because I grew up during the Joe era, that I understand the roles of the various houses and the importance of this separation to democracy, and it is one of the reasons I gravitated to this house, the House of Review. I clearly see my role here is to ensure that any legislation that passes before us is not restrictive and or does not negatively impact on the constituents of the mining and pastoral region. Conversely, if there is a need for positive or proactive legislation that assists and advances the cause of my constituents and the businesses and enterprises within it, I will act to assist such legislation to pass. In my view, it's quite simple. Fourthly, and finally, Mr. President, I must also take this opportunity to admit to be wanting to be part of setting a vision for the future of our region and more generally WA. I am often accused by my friends and colleagues, and some of them up there in the gallery today, of being expansive, an arm waver, and a chaser of dreams. And I admit I am, but I have learnt to see this as a skill of being able to spot the trends, connect the fuzzy dots, and being able to see the forest for the trees. And I want to bring this skill to this place and to this government to help to create a vision for the future for my region, and more importantly, on how we lay a pathway to achieve such vision. If you reflect on our role in this place, there are only 6 upper house members and 5 lower house members that represent the mining and pastoral region, which has an incredibly important role to ensure that the economic powerhouse for not only the state but for this nation maximises its contribution not only for their current needs but to ensure it continues to be the driver into the future. We 11 members, and I was thinking about Oceans 11, but it's Oceans to Outback 11, I'll call them. We Ocean to Outback 11 members have a special duty and responsibility to ensure the government does everything possible to provide a platform to foster and encourage enterprise and industry in that region. Obviously, this principally should be targeted at the oil and gas, mining, fishing, agriculture and tourism industries as a first pass, but there are other new and emerging opportunities that we must foster as well. And I believe, and I want to be deeply involved in being a part of achieving this. I believe we need to work to the Premier's broad vision of engaging with the North and to our West, and to continue to work on targeted programs to ensure we achieve this. And I'd submit, as I said before, that I'll be keen to get on with the job and will be pleased to be burdened with this responsibility. When I look back on my 4 years in this place, I will be satisfied only if I can see that there is genuine advancement in our region, and I will be particularly keen to see concerted progress in the areas of converting the significant amounts of water we are blessed with in the mining and pastoral region towards our future food security, significantly streamlining approvals processes for projects within a risk management framework, particularly in those industries I mentioned before, establishing a flexible tenure system within the mining and vast pastoral estate that is contemporary and fosters future growth in a range of industries and opportunities that will underpin our future. Targeted infrastructure that sustains and grows long-term productivity, increased trade and investment into our region, create new and diversified industries, value add to and within our existing supply chains, and equality in general in our government services too and within the mining and pastoral region. I list these areas. I believe I have some background in these areas and can contribute into these key areas of economic development. I know it is dangerous to list these sort of things, all sorts of aspirations within your maiden speech, as it is on the record, and people will have a want to use such self-disclosure to haunt oneself in the future. However, I believe in setting out a plan, if only for myself, and working to this plan as far along the delivery spectrum as possible. It was, however, a little disconcerting that even the Venerable Honourable Norman Moore admitted in his valedictory speech that some things take 36 years, and even then there were key activities that he was pursuing that he never got across the line. However, we shall persist. Mr President, it would be remiss if I didn't mention one more little passion I have, and I must declare. I too am a states' rights advocate. I won't go over ground covered by the Honourable Liz Bajette in her excellent address in reply to the Government, or the Honourable Norman Moore's valedictory speech, or the Honourable Peter Casson-Barnes' very eloquent speech yesterday, which all in part touched on federalism. But to suffice to say that I believe it is now imperative we call for a federation convention to try to restore the original intent of competitive federalism. I think I am right in saying there have only been 2 federation conventions, and one of those was obviously held to establish the original charter. It is my opinion it is with way past time we held another before it gets to a point of no return, and I believe there is enough concern around the country that this will get support, and if we make a genuine attempt at it, I think we can claw back some of that creep that has gone on over the years. I'll leave it there, but be assured I too am watching that insidious creep of centralism destroying what was originally intended. In closing, Mr President, I look forward to working with all members over the next 4 years, particularly in committee, and I congratulate all those new members on joining me in this chamber. Thank you.